Sit anywhere you like, honey. Coffee's fresh. The old man behind the counter said it the way he said it to every stranger who walked in, without once looking up from the sink. At 1:14 a.m., billionaire DeShawn Whitaker walked into a truck stop diner he owned and saw the man who had stolen his company 22 years earlier. The old man was standing at the sink in a stained apron, drying plates under fluorescent lights. 3 wipes. 2 taps. DeShawn's coffee stopped halfway to his mouth. Only one person in the world had that habit. Reggie Voss, the partner who had forged his signature, vanished with $180,000 and nearly destroyed his life. And now, after 22 years, Reggie was washing dishes in a truck stop that carried DeShawn's name. He didn't know, walking toward the lit windows of the Whitaker Way station diner, that he was about to spend the next 4 months relearning the one debt in his life that had never actually been paid. Rewind 28 years, to when DeShawn Whitaker was 26 and renting a 1-bedroom apartment in East Point, Georgia, 3 weeks behind on rent, working the overnight shift at a freight terminal for $11.50 an hour, loading pallets until his shoulders quit answering him. He bought his first truck that year. A 1998 Ford box truck with 214,000 miles on it, bought for $6,800 from a produce hauler who was retiring, paid for with $2,200 in savings and a loan his Uncle Marcus co-signed because no bank in Fulton County would look at DeShawn twice. He drove it himself for 2 years, hauling anything that would pay. Furniture, restaurant supply, church pews once, a piano twice. He married Yolanda Price that same year, in a Baptist church on Cascade Road with 40 guests, and a cake his aunt baked in her own kitchen. And Yolanda kept the books for his 1-truck operation at their kitchen table because they could not afford to pay anyone else to do it. In year 3, he met Reggie Voss. Reggie was 32 then. White, wiry, with a laugh that came fast and easy and a knack for numbers that DeShawn had never had. Reggie owned 2 trucks of his own, running a similar route out of the same terminal. And one Tuesday morning, over coffee at a Waffle House off Camp Creek Parkway, the two of them sketched a merger on a paper placemat. Whitaker Voss hauling. 50-50, split down the middle. Reggie would run the books and the back office. DeShawn would run the trucks and the relationships. It worked, better than either of them had let themselves hope. By year 7, Whitaker Voss hauling had 12 trucks, 31 employees, and standing contracts with 2 regional grocery chains. DeShawn and Yolanda had moved out of the 1-bedroom and into a house with a yard in Riverdale. He was 33 years old, and for the first time in his adult life, he slept through the night without doing math in his head. Then came the week that split everything into before and after. Yolanda came home from the doctor on a Thursday in September and told him she was pregnant, standing in the kitchen still wearing her work badge, both hands pressed flat over her stomach like she was holding something in that might otherwise get away from her. DeShawn picked her up off the floor. Actually picked her up. They laughed until they were both crying, and he told her that Friday he'd take her to Red Lobster to celebrate, because that was as fancy as either of them knew how to be back then. He never took her. Friday morning, the bank called. The operating account for Whitaker Voss hauling was overdrawn by $41,000. Worse than that, there was a loan on file against all 12 trucks, $180,000, taken out 8 weeks earlier, with DeShawn's signature on the paperwork. DeShawn had never signed it. Reggie was gone. His apartment was cleaned out down to the nail holes in the walls. His phone was disconnected. It took DeShawn 11 days and a private investigator. He could not afford to learn that Reggie had been gambling for 3 years, quietly, at a card room outside Biloxi and later at 2 casinos in Tunica, and that the debts had grown so large that a forged signature on a truck loan had looked, to a drowning man, like the only door left standing in the room. 12 trucks, put up as collateral. 7 of them entirely DeShawn's. The lender came for all 12. DeShawn kept one, the original box truck, the one with 214,000 miles that had since climbed past 400,000, because it was titled in his name alone and the lender's paperwork never reached it. He sold the house in Riverdale. He and Yolanda moved into an apartment above a laundromat on Old National Highway, and for the next 2 years DeShawn drove that one truck 20 hours a week and worked freight broker hours the other 50, chasing loads, negotiating rates from gas station payphones, teaching himself the difference between a rate confirmation and a bill of lading at 4 in the morning with Yolanda asleep beside him. 6 months pregnant, then 8, then holding their daughter. Kayla Whitaker was born on a Tuesday in May. DeShawn was in the delivery room. He was also, that same week, $61,000 in debt with a repossession notice taped to the windshield of the one truck he needed to dig himself out. He never told Kayla any of it. Not the forged signature, not the 2 years of driving nights and brokering days, not the name Reggie Voss. Yolanda knew all of it, because she had lived every week of it beside him. Nobody else did. It was not a secret he guarded out of shame, exactly. It was closer to a wound he had learned to keep bandaged, one he did not examine because examining it cost more than he had time to spend. He rebuilt the slow way. He renamed the company Whitaker Freight Group 3 years after the collapse, on the advice of a lawyer who told him a clean name mattered to lenders more than a clean conscience did. He grew it one contract, one truck, one relationship at a time, for 22 years, until it employed 14,000 people, ran 340 trucks, and operated a growing chain of travel centers he called Whitaker Way Stations, built at logistics hubs along the interstates his drivers ran day and night. He rarely visited the way stations in person anymore. He had people for that, and people for almost everything now, which was its own kind of loneliness he had also learned not to examine. He was still standing in the gravel lot of one of them at 1:20 a.m., 22 years and 4 months after the week that split his life in two, waiting on a tow truck that was 40 minutes out, when he pushed open the door of the diner attached to Whitaker Way Station number 114 and smelled bacon grease and burnt coffee, and felt, for reasons he could not yet name, the hair rise on his arms. The diner was called the Way Station Grill, and at 1:20 in the morning it held 4 long-haul drivers eating alone at separate booths, a waitress named Carla Jennings who had worked the overnight shift there for 9 years, and a griddle that had gone quiet an hour earlier when the last hot order cleared. DeShawn took a stool at the counter. He did not announce who he was. Nobody at Way Station number 114 had ever met the man whose name was on the sign, and at 1:20 a.m., wearing a grey fleece pullover with no logo on it, he looked like exactly what he was pretending to be, a stranded driver waiting on a tow. "Coffee's old, but it's hot," Carla said, setting a cup in front of him without asking. "That's all I need," DeShawn said. He drank it black and looked around the way he looked at everything now, cataloging without meaning to. The floor tile needed rerouting. The pie case lights buzzed. Through the pass-through window behind the counter, into the kitchen, he could see a stainless prep table, a hanging rack of pots, and an older man standing at a deep sink, working through a stack of dinner plates left over from the evening rush. The man was stooped in the particular way of someone who had spent decades bent over sinks and steering wheels. Grey hair cut close, thin through the shoulders, wearing a stained white apron over a flannel shirt with the sleeves pushed to the elbow. He looked, DeShawn guessed without really trying to guess, somewhere past 60. DeShawn watched him without meaning to watch him, the way a man's eyes will land on motion in a quiet room. The dishwasher lifted a plate from the rinse rack and dried it. 3 wipes. Left, right, then a final pass across the center. Then he tapped the folded towel twice against the steel edge of the counter, a short double knock, before he set the plate on the stack and reached for the next one. DeShawn's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. He had seen that exact motion 10,000 times. 3 wipes, 2 taps, set it down. He had seen it across a shared desk in a rented office on Old National Highway before it became Old National Highway with a laundromat under his apartment. He had seen it on paper coffee cups, on a windshield with a rag, on his own dinner plate the one time Reggie Voss had come over for Sunday supper and insisted on doing the drying because DeShawn had cooked. It was not a common habit. It was not a habit at all, really. It was a tic, the kind a body keeps without the mind's permission, The kind that survives divorce and bankruptcy and 22 years and a change of state. DeShawn set his cup down very carefully, the way a man sets something down when his hands have started to shake and he does not want anyone to see it. "Ma'am," he said to Carla. "Who's that back there? On dishes?" Carla glanced through the pass-through, unbothered. "That's Ray. Ray Voss. He has been with us for almost 4 years now. Sweetest old man you'll ever meet. Never misses a shift, never complains, keeps to himself mostly." She topped off DeShawn's coffee without being asked. "Why, you know him." DeShawn looked back through the window. The old man had picked up another plate. 3 wipes. 2 taps. "No," DeShawn said. "Just reminded me of somebody." That was, strictly speaking, true, and it was also the last honest thing DeShawn Whitaker said out loud for almost 11 weeks. He did not confront him that night. He sat at the counter until the tow truck arrived at 2:05 a.m., paid for a coffee he barely tasted, and rode home in the cab of the flatbed watching his own dead SUV drag along behind him through the dark, thinking the same 6 words on a loop that would not let him sleep. "It can't be him, it's him." He told Yolanda 2 days later, sitting across from her at their own kitchen table in a house that had a wine cellar now and a chef twice a week, in the same voice he had once used to tell her the bank had called about the trucks. Yolanda Whitaker was 53 that spring, and she had not said Reggie Voss's name out loud in at least a decade. She set down her fork. "You're sure?" she said. "It was not really a question." 3 wipes and 2 taps on a plate, DeShawn said. "I'd know that motion in the dark." Yolanda was quiet for a long moment, her jaw working the way it did when she was doing arithmetic on something that could not actually be calculated. "So what are you going to do?" DeShawn had already asked himself that question 200 times between the diner and the kitchen table, and he still did not have an answer, so he told her the truth. "I don't know yet." What DeShawn did instead, over the following weeks, was something he had not done in 15 years. He started showing up. He told his assistant to put site visits, corridor 4 on his calendar, the kind of vague block his staff had learned not to question. He drove himself, no driver, no security, in an unmarked company SUV, to Whitaker Way Station number 114 4 times in 3 weeks. Once at dinner hour. Twice after midnight. Once at 6 in the morning, watching the shift handoff at the sink from a booth in the corner with a newspaper he did not read a word of. Ray Voss worked the overnight shift, 6 nights a week, 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., and was, by every account DeShawn could quietly gather, the most reliable employee the diner had. He never called out. He arrived 20 minutes early without fail, and restocked the dish soap and checked the sanitizer levels himself, even though nobody asked him to. He ate his 1 meal break, always the same thing, a bowl of grits and 2 eggs, alone at the end of the counter, polite to everyone and close to no one. DeShawn did not go to his own HR department right away. When he finally did, it was through a side door, framed as a routine question, the kind of thing a CEO who occasionally still liked to know his own company might ask. Priya Kapoor had run HR for Whitaker Freight Group for 6 years. She was 44, sharp, and used to DeShawn's occasional strange requests that came without context and were not meant to be questioned. This one made her pause. "Ray Voss," she repeated, reading off a screen in her office on the 3rd floor of the Whitaker headquarters in Atlanta. DeShawn standing at her window with his back to her, hands in his pockets. Full legal name Reginald Allen Voss. 61 years old. Hired 4 years ago at Way Station 114, dishwasher and general kitchen support, $13.75 an hour. Clean record. No write-ups. Direct deposit to a single checking account. She scrolled. "You want to tell me why the CEO is personally asking about a dishwasher's file at one truck stop out of 340? "Not yet," DeShawn said. Priya let it sit for a second, the way a good HR director learns to let silence do work a question can't. Then she said the thing that actually stopped him. There's one thing that came up a few years back, before I connected it to anything. It's probably nothing. She pulled up a second file. We run a scholarship fund, out of the foundation, for the kids of our drivers. Started it, 12 years ago. Small awards, $2,000 or $2,500 a semester. Maybe 40 kids a year get one. DeShawn knew the fund. He had started it himself, the year Kayla got into college on financial aid, and he thought about every driver's kid who wouldn't be so lucky. For about 6 years now, Priya went on, we've gotten small anonymous donations mailed in. Money orders, never a check, never a name. $40, sometimes $50. Once in a while as low as $20. Comes maybe once a month. Not every month. All from the same P.O. box, out of Macon. I flagged it once because it's unusual. Nobody investigates a $40 money order, but it kept happening year after year and I never chased it down. Wasn't worth the staff time on something that small. DeShawn stood very still at the window. Macon, he said. That's the postmark, yeah. Priya frowned slightly, watching him. DeShawn, what is this actually about? He didn't answer her. He was doing the math the same way Yolanda had done it at the kitchen table. Arithmetic on something that could not actually be calculated, but the arithmetic kept landing on the same number anyway. A man making $13.75 an hour, 6 nights a week, 40 hours or so, before taxes. A man who rented, Priya's file confirmed a moment later when he asked. A single room above Denny's Hardware on Route 41, 6 miles from the diner, for $410 a month. A man who, on some kind of schedule only he understood, folded whatever was left over into a money order and mailed it, anonymously, to a scholarship fund built for the children of the very drivers whose company he had once helped nearly destroy. If you've ever watched somebody try to pay back a debt they think they can never actually repay, in small, quiet, thankless amounts that nobody was ever supposed to notice, then you already understand something about where this story is going. And if it's landing for you the way it's landing for me, that's exactly the kind of story worth sticking around for. So go ahead and hit subscribe before we keep going. Money, DeShawn had learned long ago, was good at solving certain problems and useless at others. He had $2.3 billion on paper. He could have paid off Reggie's rent for life without noticing the withdrawal, or had Priya cut a severance check and never see the man's face again. Both were, in their way, the easy version of this. And DeShawn found, sitting in the parking lot at midnight for the 4th time in 3 weeks, that he did not want the easy version. He wanted to understand. Understanding was not for sale, not even to him. He learned more, slowly, the way you learn a person's life by watching its edges instead of asking direct questions. From Carla, that Ray kept a poker chip in his apron pocket, worn smooth on both faces, and that once a new hire had asked him about it and Ray had said only, reminds me what 6 years looks like, and never explained further. From Dale, the kitchen manager, that Ray had shown up 4 years ago answering a help wanted sign, carrying one duffel bag, and had asked, strangely, whether the job came with health insurance before he asked about the pay. 6 years sober. DeShawn did the arithmetic on that too. 6 years sober meant Reggie had hit some kind of bottom 2 years before he ever walked into Whitaker Way Station number 114 wearing an apron. 2 years unaccounted for, somewhere between vanishing with $180,000 and reappearing 61 years old with a duffel bag and a question about health insurance. DeShawn did not go looking for those 2 years. Some part of him did not want them. He had enough of his own. What he could not stop doing was watching the sink. He came back a 5th time, then a 6th, always alone, always at odd hours, sitting in the same corner booth, watching through the pass-through as Reggie dried plate after plate. 3 wipes, 2 taps, set it down again and again, a rhythm so steady it looked less like a chore and more like a kind of prayer said with the hands instead of the mouth. DeShawn noticed things he hadn't let himself notice the first night. The way Reggie's hands shook faintly when he lifted the heaviest stock pots, an old man's tremor, not fear. The way he hummed sometimes, tuneless, under his breath, something DeShawn was almost sure he remembered from a shared cab on a long haul to Chattanooga, 22 years gone. Once, Reggie caught DeShawn's reflection in the steel of the pass-through and went still for 4 seconds before looking back down at the plate in his hands. DeShawn understood then that Reggie had recognized him 2 weeks ago probably, and had simply kept washing dishes anyway, because what else was there to do? DeShawn did not sleep well during those weeks. He would lie next to Yolanda at 3 a.m., running the same sentences through his head. Reggie forged my signature. Reggie put 7 trucks that were mine on the line for a debt that was his. Reggie disappeared the same week I found out I was going to be a father. Reggie has been washing my dishes for 4 years and mailing $40 a month to my driver's kids and never once tried to find me. He could not make those sentences add up to a single feeling. Anger kept arriving and then, infuriatingly, leaving room for something else he did not want to name. It was Yolanda, 3 weeks in, who said the thing that finally moved him off the corner booth. "You're not doing site visits, DeShawn," she said one night, folding laundry with more force than the task required. "You're doing surveillance. On a 61-year-old man washing your dishes. You've watched him for a month. What are you actually waiting for?" "I don't know," DeShawn said and meant it. "Then stop watching and go find out." He went on a Thursday, the 8th week, closing time, for 10 a.m. After the last driver had cleared out and Carla had gone home and Dale had locked the front register and left through the side door with a wave. DeShawn didn't return. He waited until the kitchen lights were the only ones still on, then walked in through the back, into a kitchen that smelled like bleach and old coffee, where Reggie Voss stood alone at the sink, apron still on, drying the last pot of the night. Reggie heard the door and turned, and his face did the thing DeShawn had been half expecting and half dreading for 2 months. It didn't ask, "What are you doing here?" It knew exactly what this was. "DeShawn," Reggie said. His voice cracked on the second syllable. 61 years old, and it cracked like a boy's. The towel was still in his hand. "I always figured if this day came, it'd come. 22 years, DeShawn said. He was not shouting. His voice was very quiet, and that quiet was worse than shouting, and some part of him knew it. 22 years. Reggie, you know what those 2 years cost me? Not the money. I made the money back. I made it back 100 times over. You know what it cost me to drive that truck 20 hours a week with my wife 8 months pregnant, wondering if we were going to lose the apartment above a laundromat." Reggie set the towel down on the counter, slow, deliberate, both hands flat beside it like he needed something solid to hold on to. "I know," Reggie said. "I've known every day for 22 years. I'm not going to stand here and tell you it was the gambling, like the gambling did it to you instead of me doing it to you. I did it. I forged your name. I put your trucks up because I was too much of a coward to tell you I was $180,000 into people I was scared of, and it was easier to disappear than to look you in the face and say I ruined us." His hands were shaking now, worse than the tremor DeShawn had watched at the sink. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you for anything. You want me gone, I'll clock out right now, tonight, and you will never see me again. I promise you that. I'll be gone by morning." He reached up and started untying the apron strings behind his neck, fingers fumbling at the knot, and DeShawn watched him do it and felt something close over in his chest like a door. DeShawn did not answer him. He turned around and walked back out through the kitchen, past the walk-in, out into the gravel lot, and got in his car, and drove home doing 80 on a road with a 55 limit, and he did not sleep that night, or the next, or in any real sense, for 4 more days. He called his lawyer on the 5th day, a woman named Denise Okafor who had handled the company's legal affairs for 11 years and had never once heard the name Reggie Voss before that call. Statute of limitations on the fraud, forgery, all of it. George's is 4 years for most of what you're describing, longer for some financial crimes, but 22 years puts you well past any of it, Denise told him, gently, the way you tell someone a fact they already suspected but needed to hear out loud. "There's no criminal case here anymore, DeShawn. even if you wanted one. There's no civil recovery either, not after this long, not with what you've already absorbed and moved past on the books. Whatever this is, it's not going to get settled in a courtroom. Then where does it get settled? DeShawn said, and it wasn't really a question either, and Denise, wisely, didn't try to answer it. He spent those days the way he had spent the 2 years after Reggie first vanished, awake at strange hours, doing the same math over and over that never resolved. Except this time there was no truck to drive, no load to chase, no clear next action that would move the number. There was only a man in a rented room above a hardware store, waiting, DeShawn assumed, to be told to disappear again. DeShawn thought about his father, dead 11 years now, who used to say a debt you can't collect is just a story you tell yourself about the past. He thought about Kayla, 21 now, in her last year at Spelman, who had grown up believing her father built Whitaker Freight Group out of nothing but grit and one truck. True, and not the whole truth, a thing he was starting to understand he owed her eventually, even if not yet. Mostly he thought about the sink. 3 wipes. 2 taps. Set it down. On the 9th day, a Saturday, DeShawn drove to Route 41 and parked outside Denny's Hardware, closed for the weekend, and climbed the exterior stairs on the side of the building to a single door with a hand-painted number 3 on it. He knocked before he let himself think better of it. Reggie opened the door in a t-shirt and reading glasses, looking smaller than he had in the kitchen, a room behind him holding a twin bed, a hot plate, a window unit air conditioner, and on a card table, a poker chip standing on edge next to a small stack of unmailed envelopes. "I have one question," DeShawn said, standing in the doorway, not asking to come in. "Why?" Reggie didn't ask why what. He sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, the way a man sits when his legs have decided the conversation is going to take a while, and he told DeShawn the truth, plainly, without a single excuse folded into it. "I started at the dog track when I was 26, just for fun, the way everybody says it starts," Reggie said. "By the time we were 4 years into Whitaker Voss, I was into people in Biloxi for money I didn't have and couldn't tell you about, because you'd have looked at me different, and I couldn't stand the thought of you looking at me different. So I told myself one more loan, one good run, and I'd fix it before you ever knew. That's not an explanation. That's just what a coward tells himself right before he does something a coward does." He looked at his hands. The forgery wasn't the worst part. Anybody can panic and do something stupid once. The worst part is I had 8 weeks between forging your name and the loan actually going through, 8 weeks where I could have walked into your office and told you the truth, and every single day of those 8 weeks I chose not to. I chose it every morning. That's not one bad decision, DeShawn. That's 56 of them. "And then you just left," DeShawn said. "And then I just left," Reggie agreed. "Because facing you was worse to me than losing everything. I want you to hear that plainly, because it's the ugliest true thing I know about myself. I was more scared of your face than I was of losing my whole life, and I lost my whole life anyway, the casinos, then the drinking on top of it, then 11 years I mostly don't remember clearly, then a shelter in Macon, then 6 years sober one day at a time, and every single one of those days I thought about calling you, and every single day I decided you didn't deserve to have me back in your life asking for anything, not even forgiveness. So I found out, through an old trucking contact I ran into by accident, that you'd started a scholarship fund for drivers' kids. And I thought, that's not me asking for anything. That's just me putting back what I can, the only way I knew how to do it without making you carry me one more time." The room was quiet except for the window unit cycling on. "I'm not offering you forgiveness tonight," DeShawn said. "I want you to hear that plainly too. I don't have it in me yet, and I'm not going to pretend I do just because you finally said the truth out loud after 22 years. Reggie nodded, like a man accepting a verdict he'd already sentenced himself to 100 times over. "But I'm also not going to let a 61-year-old man with a bad hip and a shaking hand wash my dishes for $13.75 an hour and tip money for the rest of his life while I do nothing about it," DeShawn said. "That's not mercy." That's just me being comfortable while you stay small. I'm done being comfortable about this. Reggie looked up at him, and something in his face DeShawn hadn't seen yet that night moved, cracked, held. There's a job in inventory audit at the Corridor 4 hub, DeShawn said. Real pay, real benefits, and 3 conditions, and they're not negotiable. Every dollar you touch gets reconciled weekly, by somebody other than you, no exceptions, forever. Not because I think you're the same man, but because I need to know I'm not asking myself to trust blind again. Second, random audits, no notice, any time, and you don't get to take that personally. And third, DeShawn's voice caught, just slightly, on this one. You go sit down with Yolanda, face to face. You tell her everything you just told me, every ugly piece of it, and I'm not in the room when you do it, because she doesn't need me managing how hard that conversation gets to be. Reggie's eyes filled, and he didn't try to hide it. The first thing he'd done all night that looked nothing like the man who ran off 22 years ago. Okay, Reggie said. All of it. Okay. The meeting with Yolanda happened 11 days later, in the small conference room off Priya's office, because Yolanda had refused, flatly, to have it in her home. She sat across the table from Reggie Voss for the first time in 22 years, arms crossed, and she did not offer him coffee and she did not offer him softness. I lost 2 years of my 20s to what you did, Yolanda said, before Reggie had finished sitting down. Not DeShawn. Me. I was 26 years old and 8 months pregnant, doing math on a legal pad at a kitchen table above a laundromat, trying to figure out which bill we could survive not paying that month. I want you to know that before you say one word to me, because I need you to understand you don't get to make this about your recovery. Your recovery is real, I believe it, I can see it in front of me. It's also not my problem to be moved by. I'm not here for your redemption. I'm here because my husband asked me to be, and because I decided I'd rather hear the truth from your mouth than keep imagining it in mine. Reggie sat through 40 minutes of it, mostly listening, answering every question she put to him without flinching or softening it for himself. And at the end Yolanda stood, gathered her purse, and said only, I don't forgive easy. I'm not going to pretend today changed that. But I appreciate that you didn't flinch. She left without shaking his hand. The weeks that followed were unglamorous in the way real repair usually is. Reggie transferred to the Corridor 4 hub in April, into a small, closely supervised inventory audit role, cross-checking manifest counts against warehouse stock under a supervisor named Ellis who had no idea why the CEO personally called every Friday to ask how the new hire was settling in. Reggie's old bookkeeping instincts, the same sharp mind that had once made him useful enough to be trusted with an operating account, turned out to be useful again in a much smaller, much more supervised way. He was good, unervingly good, at catching a discrepancy of 9 cases in a shipment of 4,000. He kept the poker chip in his pocket, and added that spring, a second object next to it, a folded receipt from his first paycheck, which he never explained to anyone and nobody asked about. Priya quietly ran the random audits herself for the first 3 months, unannounced, and every single one came back clean. She told DeShawn this the way she told him everything, flatly, over email, no editorializing. Clean again this week. The 4th one read. DeShawn read that email 4 times before he closed his laptop. In June, 3 months into the new arrangement, Kayla came home from Spelman for the summer and found her father sitting alone on the back porch at 11 at night with 2 fingers of bourbon he hadn't touched, staring at nothing in particular. Dad. You've been weird for months, Kayla said, sitting down across from him. She was 21, sharp the way both her parents were sharp, and she had never once in her life caught her father looking like this. Mom's been weird too. What's going on with you two? DeShawn looked at his daughter for a long moment. She had Yolanda's eyes and his own stubborn jaw, and had grown up never knowing that her existence and her father's near-total financial ruin had arrived in the same 9-day stretch 22 years earlier. I'm going to tell you something I've never told you, DeShawn said. About the company. About before it was this company. He told her everything. The placemat at the Waffle House, the 12 trucks, the $180,000, the 2 years driving nights with her mother pregnant and then holding her as a newborn with a repossession notice on the dashboard. He told her about the diner, the plate, the 3 wipes and 2 taps, the room above the hardware store, the anonymous $40 money orders from Macon. It took 90 minutes. Kayla did not interrupt once, and when he finished she was quiet a long time, turning her water glass on the porch rail. 22 years, Kayla finally said. You carried that alone for 22 years, and I grew up thinking the hardest part of your story was just, what, hard work? It was hard work, DeShawn said. It was also this. I didn't know how to hand you both halves at once when you were little. And then you got older, and it just stayed easier not to. Is that why you never talk about the beginning? Like, really talk about it? Yeah, DeShawn admitted. That's why. Kayla reached over and took his untouched glass of bourbon, took one small sip of it herself, made a face, and set it back down, which was such a small, ordinary, daughterly thing to do that DeShawn felt something in his chest come loose that had been tight for weeks. I'm glad you told me, she said. And Dad. For what it's worth. I don't think this makes your story smaller. I think it makes more sense now. By August, the rebuild had a rhythm nobody would have called warm, but that DeShawn recognized as the rhythm of a system starting to hold. Reggie worked his shifts, passed his audits, kept to himself, and once a month, unprompted, sent DeShawn a one-line email through Priya's office summarizing what he'd caught that week. Because, he wrote once, it feels like the only kind of apology that actually means something coming from me. DeShawn never replied. He read every one of them twice. A year passed. By the following July, Reggie Voss had been formally promoted to Inventory Audit Lead at the Corridor 4 Hub, a title that came with a modest raise, a supervisor's badge, and, for the first time in longer than he could remember, health insurance he did not have to ask about because it simply came with the job. He still rented the same room above Denny's Hardware, still ate the same bowl of grits and 2 eggs on his lunch break, still kept the poker chip in his pocket worn smooth on both sides. Inside his locker at the hub, taped to the inside of the door where nobody but Reggie ever saw it, was a small strip of masking tape with a number written on it in blue ballpoint pen. The number 22 had been crossed out with a single firm line. Beneath it, in the same handwriting, was the number 1. It was not his sobriety count. That number lived on a different chip, in a different pocket, counted a different way. This one was his own private ledger, the only kind he still kept. 1 full year, 365 days, of complete, unhidden, uncomfortable honesty about the debt, about the diner, about every dollar that passed through his hands at work. 22 years of hiding, crossed out. 1 year of not hiding, underneath it, and counting again from there. DeShawn still drove past Corridor 4 once a month or so, on his way to somewhere else, and sometimes he stopped in, and the 2 men would talk for 10 minutes about shipment counts and nothing else, careful, professional, not unkind. It was not friendship. DeShawn had stopped expecting it to become friendship somewhere around month 5, and had found, to his own mild surprise, that he did not need it to. What he needed, it turned out, was smaller than that and harder to get. The plain fact of a man showing up, doing the work, telling the truth, week after week, without asking to be forgiven for it. DeShawn thought, sometimes, driving home from those visits with the windows down and the interstate unrolling the way it had for 30 years, that forgiveness was not the single clean moment people made it sound like in church, or in the stories his own marketing department liked to tell about him at conferences. It was not a door that swung open once and stayed open. It was closer to something he had to decide again every week, sometimes every day, the way you decide to show up for a shift you didn't feel like working. Some weeks he decided it easily. Some weeks he didn't decide it at all, and let the silence sit there instead, unresolved, honest in its own way. He kept one thing on his desk at headquarters that nobody in the building understood the meaning of. A folded dish towel, plain white, taken without asking from the diner at way station number 114 sometime that first spring. He never used it for anything. He just kept it there in the top drawer, and once in a while, thinking something over, he would take it out and fold it 3 times the same way before putting it back. This story is a work of fiction. DeShawn, Whitaker, Reginald Voss, and every character in it are invented, and any resemblance to real people is coincidental. The gambling addiction at the center of this story is not invented as a subject, even if the man is. In the United States, an estimated 2.5 million adults meet the clinical criteria for a severe gambling problem in any given year, and roughly 5 to 8 million more experience a milder but still serious version of the same disorder, according to figures the National Council on Problem Gambling has published. Financial fraud tied to gambling debt, the kind that quietly destroys small businesses and family savings long before anyone outside the household hears about it, remains one of the most underreported forms of financial abuse, in part because, like Reggie in this story, the person carrying it is usually the last one to ask for help. If this story, or any part of it, sounds close to something in your own life or a life near you, the National Council on Problem Gambling operates a free, confidential helpline, 1-800-522-4700, available 24 hours a day. I wrote this story because the hardest debts most of us carry were never on a bank statement. They're the ones we owe people, and the ones people owe us, and the slow, unglamorous, undramatic work of paying them down a little at a time, the way DeShawn and Reggie did week after week, with no guarantee it would ever fully add up. If this one landed for you, subscribe for more stories like it, and I'll see you in the next one.